Whoa. So, whoa, 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 and all I was waiting in this waiting room. Oh, I made myself a real nasty brew, but it was warm on that cold day. And I looked all around. There was items of a curious nature. On the table, many a collectible antique. Wall-to-wall aisle space filled the place with history, bought and sold for a dime all the time. And then I looked down and to my left, where I set my gross coffee, and that's when I found this book right here. All right. Let's explore it. It says, the world's strangest mysteries. Now it looks kind of strange, but I assure you that's what it says. How strange are they? They're the strangest. So I'm going to open up a random one. All right, here's the first of the strangest mysteries. Her name is Rosemary Brown. One dull afternoon in 1964, Rosemary Brown, a middle-aged housewife living in a Victorian terraced house in Balham, South London, sat down at her piano to play a simple tune. She had bought the instrument secondhand, taken a few lessons, and could just about manage a few hymns and popular ballads. Suddenly, her hands were flying all over the keys. Music she had never heard before was filling the air. She had a fleeting feeling of elation, of intense pleasure in the beauty of the sound. Looking up, she saw a striking figure standing beside her. It was the virtuoso Hungarian pianist and composer Franz Liszt, who had died in 1886. That afternoon, Liszt did not say a word to her, but he returned. He took over my hands like a pair of gloves, was how she described her experience. The first few visits were dreamlike, though she was fully conscious. Then she began to realize she was expected to write down the music. She had had very little instruction and did not possess natural pitch. But slowly and laboriously, with the help of the composer, she conquered the technicalities. Soon, her first masterwork was on paper. One by one, she said they came to her, the spirits of Chopin, Beethoven, Debussy, Schumann, Bach, Rachmaninoff. No, I'm sorry. Rachmaninoff. Rachmaninoff. And Brahms. Berlioz, and Monteverde, queuing up to use her as the amanuensis to communicate their unwritten works. In their own individual ways, they taught her how to notate orchestral and piano works, part operas, and songs. Beethoven dictated part of the 10th Symphony. Chopin gave her piano sonatas, and Igor Stravinsky put in an appearance 14 months after his death in 1971 to dictate 60 lines of music. Critics who examined the manuscripts varied in their opinions as to their artistic merit. But most agreed that in their style and content, the transcriptions bore an uncanny resemblance to the composer's known works, and that only an advanced musician could have written them. That afternoon in 1964 was not the first time she saw the ghost of Franz Liszt. He appeared to her when she was only 7 years old, though she did not realize who he was until much later when she saw a photograph of him. Taken in an old age in a music book, the visitation took place in an attic bedroom at the top of the big old house she lived in with her parents. She was not frightened. She was already used to seeing spirits. Snuggled down in her rickety bed, she peeped over the covers and solemnly gazed at the figure of Abe Liszt with his long white hair and black cassock. He simply said, "When you grow up, I will come back and give you some music." During her school days, Rosemary had flashes of telepathy and sometimes visions of people on a different plane. Once, she saw the street she lived in as it was before any houses were built there. But otherwise, she was normal, healthy, outgoing schoolgirl. She took piano lessons for a short time, practicing at home in a freezing cold parlor on a piano with several dub keys. Then had to give them up because her parents could not afford them. Later in her teens, she managed 2 terms with good music teachers by paying for lessons out of the money she earned by running errands. And there were a few other lessons she learned, the basics, but hardly attained the standard of a concert pianist. After school, she worked in the civil service, married, and had 2 children. But in 1961, her husband died after a prolonged illness, leaving her penniless. Her life became a constant struggle to make ends meet, but she began to feel the comforting presence of a spirit she realized later was Liszt. The one luxury she had allowed herself during those difficult years was an old second-hand piano. One afternoon, 1964, recuperating at home after an accident in the school kitchen where she worked, she decided to play a few pieces to pass the time. Liszt, this time in his dark, handsome prime, appeared vividly by her side. She found he was guiding her hands. On later visits, he communicated verbally in heavily accented English. Gradually, she says she began to look upon him as a friend. They would discuss the world and its problems and subjects like reincarnation, but his fiery temperament had obviously not been changed by his removal to another world. One day, when he had made her correct a passage over and over again, she became frustrated and tired and muttered that he was nothing more than an old fusspot. He went off in a huff and did not return for 3 weeks. Liszt introduced her to Chopin. He looked so very young, she wrote in her autobiography. He has a beautiful, clear smile and exquisite manners. He looks and moves like an aristocrat, but his manners seem very natural somehow, not a pose. Chopin offered to help her with fingering. He tells me what the notes and chords are, and then we try it out on the piano. If I'm attempting a chord and my fingers are on the wrong notes, there will be a very gentle pushing until they are correct. Chopin, she said, had a rather husky voice, not deep, but with strong Polish accent. He proved to be a perfect gentleman, sometimes accompanying her to concerts. One day when they were immersed in a piano sonata, Chopin suddenly held up his hand to stop her and remind her that she had left the bathwater running. Rosemary liked Brahms. She found him both serene and strong. He's extraordinarily patient and usually manages to communicate without difficulty. Sustaining the link for long periods at a time, she took down piano music and string quartets from him, one of which was played at the end of a BBC documentary program. Because of the string quartets, I had to take much of his music down by hand, she wrote. I remember the first time he arrived with the intention of giving me music. I was sitting at the piano. I played what he gave me as well as I could, but it became difficult as he uses tenths a lot. My hands, unfortunately, are too small to stretch as far, though I can manage better than I used to. I think that Brahms must have had an extraordinary span between his fingers when he was alive. Beethoven did not arrive until 1966. For a long time, he remained an enigma. One of the first things she realized was that he was no longer deaf. Communication between them was slow because Rosemary was in such awe of him. He is an awe-inspiring person to look at, and there is no doubt he was one of the greatest souls to live in this world. At first, he would impress the music upon my mind without saying a word. And at those silent meetings, she was overwhelmed by his greatness, but gradually began to realize that Beethoven had in fact a great simplicity which was truly sublime. Gradually a bond of sympathy sprang up between them. She even saw something of his glorious bad temper. He cried out, "Mein Gott," when the doorbell rang one day when they were hard at work. Debussy rushed in and out and sometimes disappeared for weeks. Rachmaninoff was difficult at first, but friendly later. Schubert tried to sing his compositions to her in a rather flat voice. She enjoyed working with Bach. He was able to get his ideas over to me very clearly. He must have a very methodical mind. He dislikes my working at the piano and prefers just to tell me the notes. In 1970, a long-playing record of some of the works was released to a mixed reception from the critics. Some of them obviously extremely puzzled as to what to make of it. Hephzibah Menuhin, Hezbollah Menuhin, brilliant pianist, sister of the great violinist, said, "I look at these manuscripts with immense respect." And Leonard Bernstein and his wife, who entertained Rosemary in their London hotel suite, were impressed both by her sincerity and by the music she showed them. Composer Richard Rodney Bennett, "You couldn't fake music like this without years of training. I couldn't have faked some of the Beethoven myself. Why the great composer should have chosen this modest, pleasant housewife to communicate their unwritten works remains a mystery." But Rosemary Brown felt the motivation was explained in a statement which came through from distinguished musician Sir Donald Tovey. "The musicians who have departed from your world are attempting to establish a precept for humanity, i.e. that physical death is a transition from one state of consciousness to another, wherein one retains one's individuality." She had enough humor, however, to admit that she found it hard to sit and listen to some classical music. "Polien visited me once or twice and tried to give me some pieces. I didn't really care for them." Thank you for listening to this evening's story. Have a good night.